Mitch, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you on the Startup Grand stage. I think you are our 51st. No, I think you're our 50th guest.
All right.
Yeah, believe it or not.
I feel special. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm honored.
Really, really excited to have you. Why don't we go ahead and jump in? I always like to start by kind of understanding who our guests are. Maybe you can just give us a little, like, maybe you haven't done your elevator pitch in a while. Can you give us a little elevator pitch?
Sure, I'm happy to. So, you know, at the core, I've been an entrepreneur since probably the age of 13 years old. I've always been built. You know, I've built a ton of websites in my life. Built several online businesses as a teenager to when I was in college, and I graduated school, joined an advertising agency, and worked my way up to a marketing director very quickly, consulting Fortune 500 companies and very large brands on their go-to-market strategies, branding, positioning, digital marketing, SEO, SEM, and I basically they cut out?
No,
That's good.
Yeah.
I hit a wall where I stopped learning and I stopped growing as a professional, and I cold emailed a pretty well-known VC in California. His name's Jason Calacanis. He hosts this podcast called This Week in Startups. It's a great podcast. You should go check it out. And I basically asked him if I could come on the show during his Ask Jason segment to ask a question. Like, you know, I was kind of lost in my career. I was also like building like a SaaS CRM on the side at the time. I was running an advertising consultancy agency on the side and consulting various small businesses, and I was just kind of, you know, I was spreading myself thin, and I was lost. So he responded to my email and invited me on the show, and you know, when I asked the question, like, you know, where do I go from here, he gave me some sound advice. He basically said, like, it's better to be the worst bench warmer on the Knicks than the best player at the YMCA. And if you're not learning and you're not growing, you're not investing in yourself, then you're pretty much done, right? Like, I had no equity in the business that I was building, and I knew I had a lot of talent at the time. Like, I was a front-end developer, I was a marketer. You know, I was basically a one-man shop for everything, and I had a lot to offer any startup that I was going to join. So he basically told me, he's like, go find a group of founders and help them build their vision and their startup, and join a YC or join a Techstars and a tech accelerator, and just take a risk and roll the dice. And so, you know, and that sort of inspired me at the time to reach out to, you know, various companies in New York, startups that were small, that were building startups and these companies, and actually found my co-founders on Craigslist through a job post. True story. So they were looking for a director of marketing for their first hosting company called ServerStack, which wasn't called ServerStack. I rebranded it to be called ServerStack. It was previously called Reality Check Network. And it was a terrible name. So that was an easy call to make. This was 2012, early 2012. This was around January, February.
Well, I'm going to jump in a little bit because that was a slightly long elevator pitch, but
Wasn't done. Wasn't done.
But I think you know a little more than I do about raising venture capital, so that's just fine. But we're definitely want to get into the story of DigitalOcean, but I would love to start by just taking a quick step back and saying, where did you actually, you know, what are your entrepreneurial roots? Like, where did you, you know, is there a moment where you first said, oh, I really like building something, or I really like contributing to a young project, or, you know, is there anything like that in your background, or were you really sort of discovering this for the first time?
Yeah, man, I always just, I really enjoyed building and creating from a very early age. I feel like I was very much an artist growing up. I feel like a lot of the DNA that you're built with in terms of like what's translated into business is formed very, very early on in life. And I was an avid artist. I enjoyed like, sketching, drawing, and building, and I was always like playing with building blocks, and I was selling things on eBay, and I was just always finding ways to like create value in life. And I just like that part of that part of the journey of building something from scratch and building something from just an idea, a concept, and making it a reality is really what excites me. So I've been doing that since the age of 5, really.
All right, so let's go back to the Craigslist thing. Walk me through how talking to a major Silicon Valley investor turns into, I'm going to go look on Craigslist. Start with the work.
I was leveraging all channels at the time. I feel like, especially as a marketer, right? You want to A/B test every single channel possible. So I was on Craigslist, I was on Career Builder, Monster.com. I had a recruiter. I was working my own personal network.
Doesn't say much about your recruiter, I guess.
I mean, I had a couple opportunities lined up, but like, I was going to go work for ZocDoc on their marketing team, and I met Ben and Moisey, my other co-founders, and I remember that night when that day they offered me the job on the spot after the interview, which is wow. Rare if you know Ben and Moisey, and I just like I couldn't go to sleep that night. It was literally all I was thinking about was the opportunity, and I saw an early in the interview I saw an early prototype of DigitalOcean, and it really excited me because I knew the potential. I saw the opportunity to like grow this simple and intuitive cloud product for the developer community.
Yeah. So how does that work? Because you have a very creative background. You're working for marketing agencies. How do you end up working on such a technical company, such a technical project?
I mean, I've had a lot of experience prior, especially like building my own websites, building my own businesses. I've had experience like, using various hosting companies like Media Temple, HostGator, Amazon, GoDaddy.
What did that Craigslist ad say? What made you really excited about it?
Honestly, it just was like, it was an odd Craigslist ad, because I was like, I was asking myself, like, who's this hosting company in New York, like based in Soho, that's like advertising a job for head of marketing, and I was more so curious than anything else, and so I was just curious about the opportunity.
Do you think it was so untraditional that it kind of like piqued your interest a little bit?
It piqued my interest because it was very untraditional.
Yeah. So you go in, you have this first meeting with Ben and Moisey. How did you get them so excited that they offered you a position in this, what has now become a huge company?
Well, going back to my elevator pitch, my story. I have a passion for design, and I have graphic user interface experience building websites, and and so the designs that I created as part of my portfolio, I think really inspired them, as well as like my technical background and my just marketing, full stack marketing knowledge of all the different principles of marketing, and just like packaging that all together is what is now coined the growth hacker. Was like really interesting to them, and obviously it creates a lot of value for companies, and growth hackers in general are really hard to find. Yeah.
So quick poll from the audience, and by the way, we're going to have you any questions that you want to ask at any time, you can tweet them using the hashtag StartupGrindNYC. StartupGrindNYC, just use that hashtag, ask a question. We'll be pulling questions from Twitter, and I'll get my phone out in a few minutes. But just a quick poll in the audience, how many people here are starting a company that is currently raising venture capital? Can you raise your hand? All right, so that's like maybe 1/3. how many people here are more like, and it could overlap, how many people are like professional marketers? Can you raise your hands? All right, it's a different third, that's cool. So maybe we can kind of try to touch on both points because you have such a versatile background. I think first and foremost, I'm really curious in the history of how you financed DigitalOcean over the last few years. So you came on board in 2012. I noticed that you actually raised a Series A in 2014, and the company was started in 2011. So from founding to Series A, it's 3 years, which I mean, is not the prototypical story of how long it's supposed to take to raise capital, right? So can you give us a little insight on? Yeah,
we heard a lot of no's, right? Like everyone asked us, how are you going to beat Amazon? I mean, it's a pretty common question, right? Like, so that was tough to sell. But you know, we went to TechStars. We were a TechStars graduate. We had a few hundred customers when we graduated. It was January 2013. We had 2,000 customers. I remember this day like it was yesterday. And we launched our all SSD plans at $5 a month. And we went viral on Hacker News. And I was able to secure TechCrunch exclusive. And literally overnight, we went from 10 signups a day to 100. That was sustainable. And then we went viral again on Hacker News to a developer who blogged about our benchmark results versus Linode, which is one of our competitors at the time. And we outpaced them in terms of performance. And so we spiked in signups once again, and then we sort of like plateaued and leveled out around like 200, 400 signups a day, somewhere in between there. And then, so it wasn't until we were able to back the story, the vision, with the numbers, and it wasn't until we had the growth numbers till we were able to raise our first round of funding, our seed round. And it was with IA Ventures who actually recommended that we apply for the TechStars program. So we, Moisey was in touch with Brad Gillespie, who's on our board, and kept in close contact and built a really strong relationship with Brad over the years, and just always kept in touch and constantly pinged him and updated him of the progress that we were making as a company. And it wasn't until we had the revenue figures and the growth story to tie into our vision. And then because we're a capital intensive business, we ran out of that money very quickly. We only raised like $3 million, and if you're a cloud company and you're leasing out a ton of servers, $3 million goes like that. So,
so you actually, I mean, over the history of the company so far, I noticed you've actually raised more money in venture debt than in venture capital, and I thought that was very unique. Yes. So leasing. So we lease our servers. We actually own our servers, and servers are very expensive. So from a financial strategy perspective, it's better to leverage debt to pay for your leases, for your CapEx, than it is to apply equity and cash in the bank to lease your equipment. So we were able to raise or secure some very favorable credit lines with low interest rates that made it more appealing and more attractive for us to build a healthier business model and balance sheet. So that's the rationale. Yeah, absolutely. If that makes sense. Yeah. So a few of your investors are sitting on your board. Are they in favor of raising more debt, or do they actively want you to be going out in the market trying to get a higher and higher valuation so that their investment looks more and more favorable? Yeah, I mean, for them, like, ideally we build the most valuable business possible, and we exit at a very favorable on very favorable terms, right? Like, they're in this, certainly for the long game, and they see us as being, potentially one of the big tech giants in the world, and they want that for us. So, we want to build a long-term sustainable,
sustainable business, right? And we're very much aligned on that vision. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's dive into the marketing side just a little bit. You know, you mentioned using a lot of different channels in order to find the brothers that you ultimately ended up spending a lot of time with. What was your approach when you came in and the Uretskis offer you this position and you dive right in? I mean, how do you market something that could be an extremely dry tech product?
It's a very good question. So, you know, it's important to really understand your customer, right? Like, you know, I mentor a bunch of Techstars companies now, and I always ask the question, you know, how much time do you actually spend speaking to your customers on the phone, your early adopters, interviewing your early adopters, right? Because there's so much valuable insight that comes from those conversations. Like, how did you hear about us? You know, how would you describe our business to your friend? And that ultimately becomes your marketing message. You know, and so like, you really want to spend a lot of time researching your target audience. And I know that sometimes it's easy to forget the customer at the end of the day because you're so focused, you're so much like heads down, focused on building your operation and raising money, and you kind of forget about the customer, which should actually be your first priority. Like your customer is really what's going to drive your revenues for the long term, and everything that you build and that you ultimately incorporate into your product roadmap should be guided by your customer, right? Like, you want to make your customer happy. You want to see that NPS score go up. So, yeah, I think it starts with the customer, and funny story. So when I joined ServerStack, I actually had a pizza box in hand, and I walked around Soho and I knocked on doors, not residential doors, but office doors, and I offered a box of pizza in return for like 5 minutes of a CTO or VP of Eng's time to ask them questions about their cloud infrastructure setup. And
were you literally just walking from door to door, or were you targeting?
I mean, you know, I knew obviously where these tech companies, you know, were based, and you know, I did some Googling.
End up in some sketchy
Yeah. Yeah, it could have gone a lot worse, but it actually went pretty well. I learned a lot. And at the time, you know, because we were running two companies, and we were running a managed server company that only provided dedicated servers that were manually provisioned and not, you know, were not on-demand provisioned, and everyone had a public cloud environment. They were using AWS or some other public cloud, and you know, we were splitting our time and our focus. We weren't all in on the public cloud. We weren't all in on DigitalOcean, and you know, the customer research not only guides sort of like your marketing messaging, but it also guides your business strategy and your business focus. And so that was a pivotal time for us, because we, you know, after that, after I conducted that research experiment going around speaking with CTOs, and I presented to ServerStack, the company at the time, and it was really a pivotal moment for us to shift gears and shift focus.
Right. I'm starting to get some great questions on Twitter, but I'm really curious. Well, no, let's go ahead and, where's Perry CD? Perry? Hey, how's it going, Perry? Good. So Perry's question is, do you have a rule of thumb around when startups should start spending money to market their product?
It's a good question. So you obviously, the ideal scenario is you have product market fit first before you begin to really invest in advertising. You obviously want to make sure that your customers are actually engaging and active on your platform or product, or you know, and that's why it's really important to measure like churn rates, and that really is very telling of product market fit. I think the benchmark is you want to have less than 10% churn before you really begin to invest and ramp up your marketing spend. DigitalOcean very early on had a monthly churn rate of around 5%. So, and I think you want to aim below 10 to and that's like a key indicator when you have product market fit.
Well, so I think an interesting way of asking that question too could be, why did Ben and Boise first post that Craigslist ad, right? Because they were saying, we're ready to spend money on marketing, but they don't need marketing. It's like, it's one thing to spend marketing money in specific channels, but it's another thing to start promoting.
Ben and Moisey read a lot of books.
Okay.
Right? They're like, bookworms. So they read this book called Positioning, and they did a lot of research in the market, and they were losing deals left and right to Rackspace at the time, because Rackspace owned the managed service positioning in the market, and there was no way around it. Like they had to better position their business to scale their revenues. They were growing, like 20% year on year. It's nothing to be ashamed about. It was a lifestyle brand, a lifestyle business. I think they were doing about $4 million in annual run rate when I joined. So, for them, like they saw, a lot of value in beginning to just reposition. They wanted to ultimately reposition the brand and the business and the market to differentiate themselves. So.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a pretty strategic move. That's a very different way of devoting assets to marketing. So it's let's jump into the next question. Johnny Matson. There you go. Hey. So his question is, are there any distinct similarities you find between marketing and fundraising?
Yes. It's all about pitch decks. Honestly. Go on SlideShare, look up Airbnb's pitch deck. If you want to become a $1 billion business, just copy the pitch decks from other $1 billion businesses.
Is it that easy?
It's that easy. That's exactly what we did. The storytelling aspect of marketing is very much closely associated with the way you kind of pitch in an investor meeting, and the pitch decks obviously helped tell that story. And you want to have a really good narrative. You want to have a strong and compelling story backed with real metrics, real data, and you want to and ultimately that's what sells the investors is you want to sell your vision, and you need some content to back that up, because guess what, when you email an investor, they're not on the phone with you, talking to you and reviewing your pitch deck with you. They're going to look at it themselves first, right? And so if it doesn't,
10 seconds.
Yeah, for 10 seconds. So you have 10 seconds to grab their attention, right?
Yeah.
So it's absolutely a marketing vehicle that is, massively undervalued, in my opinion.
So you had a really good insight around just talking to your customer, asking your customer what they want, what it would take for them to share with their friends. Now that you've grown to be, how many employees are there roughly?
Close to 300 now.
So now that you've grown to roughly 300 employees, how does product and marketing continue to interact with each other? Because that's a completely different level.
Yeah. To be honest, we're still trying to figure it out, right? It's never an easy problem. We've always worked well. The marketing team has always worked really well with the product team to inform them of of any type of customer insight, research, market data, and product has been a great partner to DigitalOcean in many respects, and we very much operate in a go-to-market product marketing function at DigitalOcean. Whenever we release new products, we work well cross-functionally with all the various teams, including product, to deliver features to market, and we try to create an integrated approach to every single product release. And it works well. So that's hopefully that answers the question.
The sort of media around startups always seems to be that startups are either crushing it or they failed, and failure is awesome because of X, Y, Z. The failure can be intensely difficult, and I wonder if you'd be willing to share with us a few stories over the last few years of DigitalOcean, or even earlier in your background, of specific stories of failure, or a story where you've tried something that you were very excited about and it ended up not quite working the way you thought, or maybe just blowing up in your face.
Yeah, so going back to my story when I was working at the advertising agency, and I was also hustling on the side building, a SaaS CRM and my own consulting shop. I was partnered at the time with another company who we ultimately we're splitting the profits for all the client work that we were doing at the time, and the partner decided to ultimately pull the plug without even consulting me at the time, and literally my revenues went out the door overnight. I had an office that I was renting. I had a business partner that was relying on a full-time salary, and the lesson there is you want to be in control of your own destiny in many respects, especially whenever you partner with someone, whether it be internally or externally. You want to have a good relationship with your business partners. So that was a learning lesson and a failure. I built many online businesses that started to ramp up to a point where I could see it starting to take off, and but never really fully executed on the vision and really invested myself. I was always spreading myself really thin. I remember when an investor told me one time, they said, you die quicker you die faster from overeating versus starvation, and it's so important that as you build whatever you're building, right, and it's important to be laser focused on that company or that vision that you're setting, and many times I was very much scatterbrained, and I was focusing on too many things, and I failed ultimately from that approach. So
that's the overeating idea?
You're trying to consume too much, and you die from overeating, right? It's harder to win versus the inch wide, mile deep approach of just being laser focused on whatever you're doing because you want to give it 110%, and it's hard to give 110% to anything that you're doing when you have a million things going on. So that was an important life lesson that I learned pretty early on.
So you mentioned a partner that kind of flaked. I wonder, did that have an effect when you were coming into DigitalOcean in terms of some of the first people you hired and how you thought about hiring? I mean, how do you hire people?
Hiring is hard. For those of you that have built teams, that have built companies, it's one of the hardest challenges that you will face. It's really, our hiring process has evolved so much throughout the years. We have a homework assignment that's required before we meet the candidate. The candidate goes through several rounds of interviews and then meets with Ben, our CEO, for a final round interview. And it's become much more of a rigorous process, which is very healthy at the end of the day because we go through background checks, and we have a higher success rate of finding good candidates from a more rigorous process. So that's great. But very early on, you're trying to move quickly, you're trying to grow and scale as quickly as you can. So sometimes you don't have time to build in those processes very early on. So how do you kind of manage that? And really, it's instinct. It's it's having good instinct. It's having a great gut feel for folks, being able to read people, having a high EQ. And I failed several times hiring the wrong people into DigitalOcean, and I've had to let go of a lot of people throughout the years, and it's hard. It's part of being an entrepreneur, and and mentally you really have to be prepared for it. I wasn't really prepared for that part of being a successful entrepreneur. It's hard, and because you, especially early on, right? You're spending 80 hours a week with these people because you're a young, scrappy startup, and you build really strong relationships, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So that's tough.
Yeah, that's. Was there a specific moment that you can think of where that happened at DigitalOcean, or just a compilation of a lot of moments?
It was within the first couple of years. We've gotten a lot better. Luckily, and we have a recruiting team in house now, which improves the process dramatically, and so we're able to avoid a lot of those hiring mistakes. But yeah.
You've hired 300 people and you haven't burned the house down. So.
That's right. We've done okay.
Yeah, cool. Let's look at Twitter again. And remember, just tweet your questions with hashtag #BrendanLC. How about Samantha? Where's Samantha's record? Hey, right up front. How's it going?
Hey, Samantha.
So Samantha's question is, what are your thoughts on ethically selling vaporware?
Vaporware.
How transparent should founders be?
With investors specifically?
No, so we're B2B and B2C, and we'd like to start selling our product. Our product's obviously not finished. We're a brand new startup. So I want to be ethical, but I want to show the whole vision. Like, here's what we're going to look like in 2 years and in 5 years.
So the idea that you're selling the vision without telling people that it's not actually built yet.
Yeah. Vaporware.
So I actually have an interesting story from my Techstars days. This company called Cloudability didn't have a product at the time, and they simply put up a landing page on the website on the internet, and they described their product and what they were ultimately going to release, and they received thousands of signups from folks that were interested in using the product because it was quote unquote coming soon. So they were able to leverage that demand to inspire and tell the story to investors, and they were ultimately able to raise, which is, by the way, this is very hard to do, but they were able to raise a seed round from that list, because I think they surveyed the list, and a lot of the folks were willing and committed to pay for the service once it was available, and so that's one approach. Not sure if it's applicable to your business model, but it could be worth trying.
Have you, with DigitalOcean, have you ever built in a feature that didn't quite exist yet, just to see how many people click on the button?
Yes. Going back to my A/B testing story. So it was funny, actually, at Techstars, the whole accelerator approach is all about lean iterative testing. It's if you ever read the book Lean Startup, it talks all about the agile process, and you're trying to test, iterate, and scale and refine and this and that. But very early on, we wanted to know from our customer base which products and features they were most interested in, and so we launched a homepage that had dead links to various features that we weren't offering at the time, and then we would just evaluate, through Crazy Egg, the click map overlay to see where everyone was clicking, and that helped guide our product roadmap, and so that's just, it's one funny story. And now and then obviously you have Optimizely, and you have other A/B tools that are best of breed, and you should be using those versus the our approach, the DigitalOcean approach of just throwing up a website. But the point of that story is really just to early on take risks and take chances. It's not going to matter really. I know a lot of folks, I think early on, get worried that if I launch this feature, if I put this on the website, it's going to kill the business, and sometimes CEOs especially overthink it, and it's really it's not that bad. Like there's so much flexibility, especially when you're young. Like no one knows about you. Like now's the time to take chances. Like test different things. Test as much as possible.
There's no negative brain.
There's no negative, exactly.
So you didn't get tons of angry emails saying, "Hey, click on this link and it'll help me out."
No, it was totally fine. It was surprising.
Yeah. I mean, Dropbox very famously did that, right? Like they said, "Oh, this amazing product, and you can save your files to the cloud," and it turned out
That's interesting. I never knew that.
they were like 10 months away from.
That's probably where we stole the idea from.
Yeah, it's become much more prevalent.
Yeah.
Let's look at. All right, we have a few more questions here. Oh yeah, so Spider-Gram. Hey, is your name Graham? Or is it actually Spider-Gram? Spider-Gram.
I love the handle. That's a great handle.
Yeah, what's his name?
Spider? First name Spider?
Yeah.
I love it. It's badass. It's a badass name.
So we can change your name right now if you want.
Spider? Wainer?
Yeah.
Nah.
Think about it. While you're thinking about it, I have a question for you. Spider asks, for Mitch, share the transition from newly hired CMO to founder, also your relationship with other founders. So what was the transition like from CMO to founder, meaning that you're now sort of a founder of this thing that's become. I mean, is it like employee versus founder?
Exactly. I mean, you came in as kind of an employee, and then next thing you know, you're at the helm of something.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Having the founder title definitely carries a lot of weight, and it's and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that title, and I definitely recognize that, and I'm humbled by it at the same time, and I think it's important that you're very aware and you don't take advantage of it as a founder, and you're mindful of giving instructions and guiding employees internally, because they'll very easily shift gears to work on whatever you tell them to work on, because you have that credibility. So there is a mindset shift that needs to happen. Going from an employee to being a founder of a large high growth business, and it's interesting. Like I'm still going through the the transition in my head. Like it's still very much surreal in a lot of ways. Like DigitalOcean's only been around for realistically like 4 years, so it's a very short time frame in career time, right? So I'm trying to take it day by day, and I'm very much aligned with the goals of the business and the goals of my CEO, and I want to make sure that we're building the most valuable business possible, and that's in the best interest of our investors, that's in the best interest of the employees of the company, and I'm ultimately responsible for doing whatever it takes to help the employees of the company succeed, and so I always make myself available. I'm constantly integrating myself with the various teams and departments to create FaceTime and to just add additional perspective. But it comes with a lot of responsibility that you just have to be very much aware of. So yeah.
Cool. So we want to be very mindful of your time. I know you have to go pretty soon. Typically, at every one of our startup grant events, we actually flip it around at the end. We want to hear from the audience. So we're going to kind of leave questions at that point. But if you can stand up one at a time, obviously not everybody, but if you can volunteer, give us about 30 seconds on who you are, what you do, and how people in the audience can help you advance whatever you're working on, then that would be excellent. We're going to need a brave volunteer to stand up and go first.
We got one back there.
We got one back there, and there are a few microphones floating around too, so we'll go to Jason here next.
Hey guys, I'm John. Recently just started a new space actually called Voyager. So I wanted to tell you guys all about it and kind of get it on your radar. It's a new community, global initiative for travel startups, travel founders, connecting them with investors, corporations, and most importantly, each other. So anybody who works in the travel sector, that'd be incredible. I could chat with you a little bit about what you're looking to do, how a community can support you, and yeah, or if you have any friends who are starting a company in the travel space, that would also be really helpful. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I'm John, and I was called Voyager.
Voyager, so travel startups.
Yeah.
Cool. How about Jason right here, right behind you?
So my name's Jason, and it's kind of creepy how identical our stories are in terms of your entrepreneurial background and leading into a company that's in a high growth mode. So my company's Liquid Sky, which is also very similar in terms of DigitalOcean, but targeted towards gamers. So we provide a DaaS solution, desktop as a service solution for gamers to access a high performance PC in the cloud and stream back the experience. So very similar to Hyper, just compression algorithm. We just hit
That's very
500,000 users this week, and
Wow.
just closed the series. Yeah, and 50,000 Android downloads yesterday or 2 days ago. So really exciting, but basically we need help on hiring. So we just closed the series, our seed round. So that'll be announced next week. Press release which we're excited about. So we're hiring for developers, both front end and back end, as well as designer and email and retention marketing. So that's position we're looking to fill, and I'll also be really interested in talking to you and kind of we share very similar
Sounds
stories.
good.
I'm sure there's a conversation we can have there.
Well, shoot me an email, mitch@digitalocean.com.
It's easy to remember.
There you go.
So email and retention marketers, you need to come talk to Jason and Jared. Yeah, awesome. And if there are any developers in the audience. Cool, who wants to go next? Yeah, right in the middle.
Hey, I'm Max. I'm building a startup which allows small businesses like coffee shops and restaurants, like burger shops, whatever, all sort of the marketing functions. And we're about to launch, but we need someone who would help us with building the customer relationships. So I'm sure I'm in the right place here, and I think, come and talk to me if you're interested. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Hi, my name is Ivo. I work in business development at Flatiron School. Flatiron School is an accelerated learning program for passionate individuals to career change and become software engineers. So if anybody's looking to hire our developers coming out of the program, we love the opportunities.
So maybe Liquid Sky right here.
Yeah.
It's time here. Yeah, Samantha, what's going on?
Hi, we're going to stop building repo-ware, so we're hiring developers. We found a way to save retail trillions of dollars per year by when you want to buy a thing, like let's say a shirt, we ask you what the maximum you pay is and how long you're willing to wait. And then in real time, our algorithm looks at a host of factors to see whether we should consummate your purchase immediately within your duration or not at all. And give you a real-time response. So that eradicates sales and discount.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Samantha. Sounds like you should be talking to Flatiron School as well. Who wants to go next? Yeah, right there.
Hi, I'm Prue. I work for Activistic, which is a tech company based out of Australia. And we built a patent pending piece of technology that enables people to donate to charities via their mobile phone bill. So it means that no credit card or bank details are needed. So I work on an app here called Veterans Call that works with charities that support veterans active duty military and their families. But we're also looking at white labeling the technology. So if there's any philanthropists in the audience or people who work with non-profits, please show.
Cool. So if I have AT&T, can I donate to you?
Yep. So not all, there are some issues with some networks, but the majority of American networks, and we're about to launch in the UK as well.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Right here in the corner. Somebody coming, but you can chat if you want to.
I represent the over 50 crowd, doing a career reboot, and I have a little vaporware, pre-vaporware idea that I got working for a company that's in the storage logistics business and the fine art services, with a lot of warehousing of art museums and galleries, and it involves property and a lot of the things that there's any developers or people that want to talk about it, I'd like to network. I've been developing some small servers and systems using DigitalOcean.
All right.
I'm not sure if we're involved with designing, but it's so much cleaner than the AWS. It's boom, boom, boom. It's just,
Speaking my language.
That's the problem.
thank you personally.
Thanks for the plug.
All right.
I didn't ask, but how many people here are actually DigitalOcean customers or have used it before?
If you're not, Startup Grind 15. You didn't even know. See that? $15 off. Sign up for
I read that
DigitalOcean.
book before it came. I couldn't find one.
There you go. It's right there. All right, who wants to go next? I think we have time. We have time for like 3 more, maybe. Oh yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Grace. I'm the CEO of Slinger. It's slingernoe.io. We have a low-code application platform as a service that we use to create software as a service, and we are opening to a developer community probably first quarter 2017. We're at the point now where we would take free of charge some beta developers, and using it would allow you to create a web application really, really fast that would serve as a pretty good prototype. So if anybody here is interested in participating in that, for the, the quid pro quo is just feedback, we're happy to help.
That's good. Very cool.
SLINGR, not my name.
All right. Yeah, let's do like 2 more. Anybody? Anyone? Is there anyone who's not working on a company and just want to push themselves?
That's a good idea.
Right?
Yeah, sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes you don't have the idea or the company. You just want to join a company.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I have a business degree and I'm interested in any sort of entry-level marketing or business role in a company. And then, I'm looking into beginning programming too, and software engineering, development, a lot of different transitional potentials. So you might be looking to hire.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you could have a lot of good conversations. Thank you, Zoe. Thanks for having the courage to pitch yourself. Let's see. Let's do 2 more. Let's do 2 more. Anybody? Too brave. Yeah, right in the front here.
Hi, I used to be an engineer, technical, and then I went to user experience because along the way I thought that I would combine art and technical. So anybody that's interested in the user experience, like building apps or anything, just let me know. I do code too, HTML, Java, CSS. So I just got all this experience before I use that. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. All right, who wants to go last? Anybody? Yeah, in the back.
Hi, my name is Karen McMillan. I work for a startup company in the Flatiron District. I work for an online reputation management company. So if you're interested in controlling your Google search results, maybe you have something negative about you online that you'd like for not to be there, come talk to me about your online reputation.
Cool. What's the company called?
It's called Brand Yourself.
Brand Yourself. Yeah, cool.
We were on an episode of Shark Tank.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cool. Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We have some pizza if you want